first time in my life I've heard the end start again. Not the first time I've heard answers I don't want. They're always showing up. I know it's worth more than gold.
Ladies and gentlemen, the program starts in 1 minute.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to session number 5, Plastics and the Circular Bioeconomy. To get you to take your seats and to actually focus on what's going on stage, we'll play a little game. Hands up if this is your first session today. Yeah, very good. Hands up if you're under 30 and you're really very worried about what happens here. Three hands of my speakers. Okay, you'll see the name of the game, ladies and gentlemen. Last night at the Intercontinental Hotel, there was a number of 8, and that's a lot for Finland. We had 8 protesters who were buzzing about the front door and confronting me and saying, is this the place where all the old rich people are staying who flew in on a huge carbon footprint and then came down with a motorcade to the Finlandia Hall to pontificate about the environment and our future? And I said, full points, young sir, for being this eloquent at 1 o'clock in the morning. Also, you've got a point. So ladies and gentlemen, you heard the children yesterday. I heard them last night. We have a real duty to make this good. We have a duty to walk out of here, having listened, having responded, having given us people on the stage a really hard time, which brings me to my second point, to find solutions to the plastics problem that we all know we have. Hands up if you've downloaded the WCEF 2019 app. Nice. What's your reason for not downloading it? Sorry, I'm not pointing at anyone. So the reason why I'm saying this is you can ask questions of us here on stage using that app, and we would like you to do that and to ask difficult questions and to keep them coming throughout the sessions, because whenever we have a panel, I'll run over to the iPad and I'll look at the questions that are trending, and we'll put these questions to our fantastic speakers here. And ladies and gentlemen, last but by no means least, I know this is perhaps not the audience that I'm usually used to for this kind of warm-up, but I'd like you to ask that when you see something you like something you see, or you hear something you love, please give these guys a round of applause, because they've come from far. They've made themselves available to present in front of all of you here. And I think they deserve great applause for that. And I think we're going to practice that with one round of applause for our speakers this morning. There you go. Ladies and gentlemen, our first speaker of the day is Mr. Jos Blériot, Executive Officer of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. And let's do it again.
Thanks a lot. Feels like I'm living on credit here, having been granted a round of applause without having done anything. So I hope you don't take it back when I'm finished. We're going to talk about plastics today. The clock is not working, just so you know. So I'll try to do my best to stick to time anyway. And yeah, plastics is really one word that we've all been using a lot over the past, at least the past 2 years. There was a big public outcry, of course. There are obscene images out there. We know the pollution angle. We know the impact that David Attenborough had with his Blue Planet series on BBC. And we've been doing at the Foundation quite a lot of work on the plastics value chain, trying to see what the state of affairs was, how we can make it better, how we could retain the functionality and the usefulness of plastics without having the drawbacks and the negative impacts. One of the conclusions that we came to in the very first report was that if nothing is done, by 2050, there could be more plastics than fish in the sea. And by the way, it doesn't look like that. I'll let you judge if that's a good or a bad thing. The images that you can find if you Google plastic in the sea are so horrific that I thought actually this one was more cheerful to illustrate the point. But also what we found, looking at the plastics value chain and the economics behind it, is that we really need to look beyond the sea. It's not all about plastic bags ending up on beaches. It's not only about the marine ecosystems, even though these detrimental effects are very emotional. That's also why there was so much mobilization behind that issue. So if we do look beyond the horizon and beyond the sea, we can also find that there are extremely important impacts that are sometimes a bit hidden. So I've talked about the plastics and fish. Plastic production is set to grow massively by 2050 in a business as usual scenario, which means that the plastics share of global oil consumption could jump from 6% today to about 20% by 2050. And in correlation to that, plastics share of the carbon budget could go up to 15% compared to 1% now. That's only one sector. So imagine, because all sectors are growing, the share of the carbon budget for absolutely everything is going to get bigger, and I don't think we can go above 100% in a scenario which is not academic, and we're not talking about academic stuff here. So the important thing as well is to understand that there is growing consumption and there's growing affluence out there. And for the very first time in 2017, the Brookings Institution has estimated that middle-class or affluent households will account actually already for the majority of the world's population, which is great news. It means more access to health, better education, more material comfort overall. But it also means, of course, more linear consumption patterns, more frequent replacement rates of assets, and more consumption, more on the go, more disposable, more linear plastic production. So this is the context that we're operating in. And the Foundation launched a couple of years ago its new plastics economy commitment. The latest report was released in spring, in March actually. The idea was to say, let's align behind a common vision. Let's find common technical definitions of what we mean by recyclable, what we mean by compostable, and agree on these terms. And once we agree on the terms, set out a journey to commitments, time-bound commitments. And we have gathered at this stage about 350 signatories, more than 150 businesses that represent combined 20% of all plastic packaging used globally. We have a lot of governments signing up, a lot of cities as well. France was one of the pioneer ones. UK has. Ghana, Kenya, we're getting a lot of signatories coming and saying, we want to do something in this. And the report that I mentioned earlier is actually available to download, and it details for every company, every city, and every country, the exact commitment and the exact time by which they have committed to reach their target. For instance, the consumer packaged good, retail, and packaging producing signatories, that's about 110 in total, all have committed to making 100% of their packaging reusable, recyclable, or compostable by 2025. And that's a really significant endeavor. They will be held into account. They have signed up for it. It's all disclosed. You can find it in the report, and we will go back and check regularly. And what we will do as well is once a target is achieved, we will ask for more ambition, increase the level, because jointly we can do that. Naturally, there's also increasing, growing momentum around this issue at institutional levels. And we know that the European Commission has been pioneering in its approach to single-use plastics. The plastic strategy is actually the poster child and the best example of a circular economy action turned into legislation. And that has been done by bringing all the stakeholders around the table, taking that whole value chain approach, but also being firm on something and saying, for some applications, it's just not acceptable. You shouldn't put stuff on the market that nobody can do anything with. It just doesn't work. So how do we regulate? How do we, and it's all not all the question about bans. Bans is one thing, curbs the excess is fine, but also foster a system that works. What we consider a good approach within the New Plastics Economy Initiative as part of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation is to look at 3 pillars. We eliminate the plastic we don't need. We innovate so that the plastic that we need is actually fit for purpose, fit for circularity. So in the case of food packaging, can be compostable, and that's where the bioeconomy comes in, but we'll have more examples later in the session. Or we circulate, which means we also work on the business models. And the containers that can be reused should be put back in circulation, and we should have a contained flow of plastic packaging that can lend itself to various applications. And at the end of their first useful life, also be fit for recycling. And that really means that it's not only a question of saying, this material is forbidden, this is what you can do, this is what you can't do. We also need to realize that the current apparatus that we have might not be fit for purpose. We have to invent the mechanisms whereby those business models can thrive. By the same token, we don't necessarily have all the materials that are fit for circularity at the moment. So there is a need for research and development. And this is something that, for instance, the G7 is taking forward under the French presidency, looking at how we can create potentially innovation funds for circular materials. Can that actually be taken forward by pioneering companies working together with government in order to put the backbone of the system that we need in place? At longer-term level, there are initiatives. Norway pushed a resolution on marine litter and microplastics at the United Nations Environmental Assembly a couple of years ago. Canada implemented the Plastics Charter as part of the G7. There are a lot of things coming together, but we need to act at all levels, so all timelines are important. And commitments by companies, governments, all go into that same direction, provided, once again, we agree on what we mean. The terms are important, the timelines are important, and the desired outcome is also very important. I was reminded of a scene in The Graduate, which actually gave the title of my presentation by Martin Stuktai, I don't know if he's in the room, when we worked together on the very first New Plastics Economy report in 2015. It's a scene where Dustin Hoffman, I can't remember his name in the film actually, is taken aside by his dad. He just graduated, he's wondering what he's going to do. And that's a 1968 film, by the way. And his dad says, "One word, son, there's a future in plastics." Yeah, there probably is. And he was right, by the way. There's a massive future in plastics. I don't think he was envisioning the kind of future we're talking about today, but here we are. So there is a future in plastics. It has a lot of really important applications, but I think it's up to us collectively to take ownership of that future and turn the current system into something that works in the long term and curb those negative impacts that are, frankly, are not able to continue if we want to be able to carry on with the lifestyle we have, but also make sure that the detrimental effects are curbed totally. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Sit here.
Yes. Could I ask you to take your place on the stage? It is a very special honor to introduce our next speaker, the chairman of the Carlsberg Group and the Carlsberg Foundation, Mr. Flemming Besenbacher.
Thank you very much. As what's just being said, being chairman of the Carlsberg Group, but also the Carlsberg Foundation. And I was also chairman to the Danish government on a report on circular economy, and I'll come back to that in just a second here. We already heard a lot about plastic here today, and I think also circular economy and plastic is very much embedded in many of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. I think this is a great framework, and I see more and more companies around the world today which are actually integrating these 17 Sustainable Development Goals in their strategies. And therefore, I really see a lot of momentum around the world, because when businesses is really incorporating these in their strategies, things will happen in the future here. I keep saying that the most important of these goals is number 17 for partnerships, because no single industry, no single government, no single NGO can solve neither the plastic problem nor some of these other issues here we're facing with a population growing from 7 to 11 billion people. And as was just mentioned here before, we're seeing more and more people lifting up into the middle class, which is great, but that also means a huge consumption, both energy, food, and also plastic in the world today. And this strategy about partnership means that we should have partnership between governments doing the right legislation. We should have partnership with businesses, but also with academia, because if we're going to solve some of these issues in the world today, innovation is going to be incredibly important. We cannot just rely on the technology we have today. We have to develop new technology. I think it's also important to see that when I travel around the world, that these 17 Sustainable Development Goal is not here in Europe here only. It's in Spanish countries, in Chinese countries. Everyone around the world now have this framework for discussing these things here. As I mentioned here, back in 2017, I was chairing a committee to the Danish government on circular economy. We came with 27 specific recommendations to the Danish government, and I'm pleased actually now that this is now turned also into a strategy for the Danish government on circular economy, and actually also now adding on to that a new plastic strategy. So as was just mentioned here before, you see more and more government around the world also incorporating that. I will show a small video now about circular economy.
Vi har i mange år levet i en lineær økonomisk model. Vi udvinder nogle råstoffer, vi producerer, vi forbruger, og så smider vi noget væk, som vi så definerer som affald. Nu ser vi, at denne model er under forandring, og vi bevæger os ind i en ny økonomisk model, der kaldes cirkulær økonomi. I cirkulær økonomi gælder det om at få mest mulig værdi ud af de ressourcer, vi har, og dermed skabe nye økonomiske muligheder og skabe ny økonomisk vækst. Det er der alt mulig grund til, specielt i disse år, hvor vi ser, at ressourcerne bliver mere og mere knappe, og hvor råvarepriserne stiger. Cirkulær økonomi handler i bund og grund om sund fornuft, når vi producerer, designer og forbruger og skaffer os af med det, vi ikke skal bruge længere. Der er god økonomi i at dele og få adgang til tjenester uden at eje dem. Der er god økonomi i, at vi designer vores produkter, så de kan repareres og vedligeholdes. Og der er god økonomi i, at genbrug og genanvendelse skal være normalen, og at affald ikke længere skal være slutningen på vores forbrug, men begyndelse. Kort sagt, der er ikke noget, der længere har affald. Cirkulær økonomi har et enormt forretningspotentiale, endda med et stigende globalt marked. Mange danske virksomheder er godt i gang, men vi skal gerne have endnu flere med.
And if you look at the report, which can be downloaded on the internet, there was 4 R's in the front cover here, and by the way, it was also a golden front cover, because I really do believe there's a lot of golden business opportunity in actually turning into a circular economy from the business point of view. And the 4 R's is, of course, reduce, reuse, recycle, and rethink. And again, I really do believe that rethinking is very, very much important here. We will tomorrow in Denmark have a general election, and we will soon have a new government. You had one in Finland here yesterday, and I will do whatever I can actually to implement this circular economy in the way they're doing their business for the future here. If I look in the Danish government here and the report they have now adopted here, there are 6 headlines here. One of them is actually business to drive the circular economy. It's very much using the data, a science-based approach here, using the data to analyze these things here. It's by design. Every product here starts with the design, which is incredibly important here. Also, new consumer behaviors. Plastic does not have wings, it does not have legs. I mean, when it ends up out there, it's due to us doing what we shouldn't do with it. Then actually also creating a new recyclable wasting material here, not only for plastic, for many other materials, and then actually for the biomass. You can again find this report on the internet here. I'm also the deputy chairman of the Danish Innovation Fund, which is stimulating collaboration between universities and businesses here. And together with McKinsey, we drafted a report actually on plastic again. And I've given some numbers here in Denmark, and we're not very good right now. There's around 350,000 tons of plastic here, and we're only reusing around 50,000 of these plastic here. So what can we do? Much better mechanical recycling, much better chemical recycling, and again, a lot of innovation. There's some low-hanging fruits which we all can do here, and we're trying to do this in Denmark and around in the world. I've also seen when I travel around in the world, actually a lot of new startup companies here coming. And let me just take one example. A fairly small company yet in Denmark here. It's called Plastics. So to really take the fishing nets from the North Sea, actually turning that into high-quality plastic raw materials here. And of course, that's great. I didn't know that this fishing net was only used 4 or 5 times here. They're taking them, producing new material here, which can be reused. And they now start to collaborate with companies around the world. They're collaborating with a company in UK here, designing chairs out of this waste material previously from the fishing net here. There's companies with fishing lighting here, making circular lamps here, building them like Lego blocks, putting them together in such a way. So actually reusing this material into high-end products here, I think is a great way, and many consumers like it very much. Another company in Denmark here is called Fair Plastic here. They're again reusing the PET from food packaging here. They built a new plant in the Netherlands here, where they really have around great material here around the year. 85 reuse of this PET in the businesses here, a large reduction of CO2. And you may say, why did they build this in the Netherlands? And the reason for that in Denmark, we do not have a national waste strategy yet. So it's actually the 98 different municipalities who decide what is waste and how should waste be handled. And therefore, there was not scale and volume yet to do this in Denmark. So actually having a national waste strategy is actually also very, very important if you're going to recycle some of the plastic material here again. Standing here, of course, being chairman of Carlsberg, I have to show also what we are doing here. As you probably know, we're probably selling the best beer in the world here. But when we're selling beer in the world, we're using cans, we're using bottle and PET. And we also decided to launch a quite visionary sustainability strategy here, which is called Towards Zero. And we will have no carbon emission at our brewers in 2030, and we will have no water waste at our brewers in 2030. And we are very well ahead of that. And from a circular point of view, some of the waste material from our brewers is now used at biogas plants here, which makes a lot of sense. But when we're selling our products, of course, packaging is still very important. And you've probably seen that when you buy these 6 cans of Carlsberg here, then in the past they were wrapped with a lot of plastic, which made a lot of sense. But then we started to rethink and see how could we avoid this plastic here. And the idea came up actually to glue these 6 cans here together, removing all the plastic. It took a long time here, first of all, to come up with the idea. Secondly, to find the glue which was cradle-to-cradle certified, making the glue sufficiently strong that the cans was held together, but also not too strong that actually consumers could break them apart. And I know it doesn't solve the plastic issue again, but I think it's one example, again, we all companies have to rethink. And in Carlsberg, that means actually we save around 1,200 tons of plastic every year, or equivalent to 60 million plastic bags. Again, it doesn't solve all our issue. We're still using plastic in packaging, but it just shows one example here where we all companies have to rethink in our value chain here. Then we up also telling a little bit about recycling, because when we are selling our cans and our beers in glass cans and bottles here, we have in Denmark a fantastic depositing system with return rates at 93%, which I think is quite remarkable here. And again, I mean, doing this, returning all these things is, of course, lowering the CO2 footprint, actually also lowering the amount of material being used here. And I'm also pleased to see that although we only have 93% in Denmark, which I think is pretty good, our Finnish partner here, Sine Brykhoff, is actually, I believe, maybe then we are 92 in Denmark and 93 here, the world champion. And again, this concept here, and that's another area where I think in EU, for example, I mean, imagine that EU legislation, we had this recycling system all over Europe that could actually help in limiting these plastic cans in the world. So let me just finish again saying that for all of us, I think we have to learn 3 R's, 4 R's here. Reduce the amount of material, reduce the amount of plastic where it makes no sense here, being much better in reusing it, much better in recycling it, and then finally, we all have to rethink. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. If you could join us here in the plenum. I have a quick question to the audience. Actually, I have 2. I have a mean one, and then I have a more optimistic one, so bear with me. The first question is, who here has managed to reduce their carbon footprint in the last 5 years? This fills my heart with gladness, because this is quite a number. This is about 30% of you, which is great, which is as it should be, because you're actually the people who know, who are in the know. Now hands up who has plans to take significant action to reduce your footprint even further in the next year or so. It's really funny that this isn't everyone. No, well done, guys. Well done. That's what I wanted to hear. But as a question to you, I mean, seeing this and seeing yours, the discussion around plastic circular economy is still fairly pessimistic, and for good reason. Can you share sort of your one highlight of something that makes you positive that we will actually turn the tide, that we'll actually manage?
Well, first of all, we cannot avoid plastic in our society. I mean, if you look at the hospitals, many places around the world, I mean, plastic will still be around there. I just think we have to use plastic in a much more intelligent way. And first of all, it all starts with the design. When you design a given product which contains plastic, then think about the end use of that plastic here. And as I said before, plastic does not have legs, it doesn't have wings. And I think you know better than I do, but there's 10 rivers around the world which account for, 80% of all plastic here. So we should all rethink, but I think also innovation. I see a lot of possibilities actually being much better in active recycling plastic, both mechanical recycling, also chemical recycling here. For our PET bottles, we will in 2022, I believe it is, have 50% of recycled plastic in our PET bottles for Carlsberg. So every company have to do this here. And then, of course, there's a lot of things to be done on the government level, new legislation. And this one-way plastics should, of course, be avoided.
I will come to that later. So legislators, please don't leave the room. We'll have questions for you as well. Jos, if you'd care to comment.
Yeah, sure. I think, first of all, we know a lot better what the impacts of the systems are. And we, for instance, when we calculated that at global level, only 2% of plastic is recycled at the same level of quality, that was quite a big surprise for a lot of actors. We thought that we had a reasonably good grasp of what the system entailed. A lot of people notionally think that because there's more recycling logos on a lot of products, that battle is being won. Actually, if you look at the stats and the figures, it's exactly the opposite. So we have a much better view. We have more commitments. The science is getting better on the impacts. The science in material terms is getting better at finding the right molecules. And also, being an iconically linear material, plastics is now under fire because everybody wants to go circular. There's a lot of push for circular material flows, and plastics is really high on the agenda. Look at what China's done with the national sword policy, banning the import of plastic waste. At European level, that meant that last year, in less than 12 months, we moved from 165 kilotons of plastic exported per month to just 12 in less than a year.
I've got one more, because you both picked up on that plastic doesn't have feet, wings, or isn't able to wiggle. I'll ask the audience the same question as you, so I'd like to see some hands, and I'd like you to answer. Even in the Western world, or even in Europe, is recycling easy enough for the consumer?
I'm sure it can be even better here. And of course, in Denmark, I mean, as I said, I mean, one of the showstopper right now is that we do not have a national waste strategy here. I think this is really the time for the government to do these things here. I know companies, as I mentioned here, Ferg, I mean, they build a fantastic plant in the Netherlands. Why didn't they do in Denmark? Because there's simply not scale and volume enough. So all over Denmark, they should actually handle this plastic waste the same way. Then you can collect it, and then you can actually recycle it.
Yeah, and also the fact that, what do we mean by recycling? In most cases, it's downcycling, so you get one detour on the way to the dump. But actually, if you mingle and if you compound materials that can't be separated, then you're only adding one step. So let's be clear about what recycling means, and let's be clear that the priority is to get recycling to move up in quality, not only in terms of percentages.
And if I may add there, in the FAC plant in the Netherlands, they have robotics which actually sorting this plastic into 7 different components. Yeah. Because as you're saying, plastic is not the same. So it's having the high-end plastics, the low-end plastics, and doing different things with these things. And robotics can help you doing that today.
So 13 seconds to go. I'd like to ask once more with a better phrased question. Who feels that it's easy enough for you to do your part as a consumer for recycling plastics? So at least that's sort of about half the team here. Which is not nearly enough, obviously. Thank you very much. Our time is up. We'll see you later. And now, come on, pick it up a little. They gave good. Come on. Audience, are you ready to see some solutions? Yeah. You're a tough crowd. Are you ready to see some solutions to the plastics problem? Yeah. There we go. Here we go. Next up, Mr. Runstrand of Case Tomra.
Thank you. It's a great honor to be here. I think all of us here, being in this auditorium, know that the world can survive us, but we cannot live around the world. And inspired by all the youth in the calling for action and a real change, also alarmed by all the environmental challenges we see about plastic ocean, global warming, but also feeling a possible acceleration by regulation. Look at the European Union with the Single-Use Plastics Directive. Look at Ellen MacArthur Foundation getting all the signatures committing to change, and the possibilities with digitalization. Also inspired by our 45 years of activities in the sector of collecting and recycling plastics, makes me think that we are now at the point where we can actually deliver a real change. And that's what I'm going to talk about. A couple of solutions and how we tie them together, and also a commitment. My name is Stefan Runstrand. I'm heading the company called Tomra, based in Norway. We started in 1972 to develop machines, which you see on the up left corner here, that collect bottles and cans. If you go into the ocean and look around, or cleaning our beaches, you would find bottles and bottle caps are the collective single biggest item, number of items you find there, next to cigarette butts. But it's really a problem, and they are flowing out there. So we have developed solutions now. We have 82,000 of these machines placed in those markets where it's a so-called deposit legislation, where actually the consumer is incentivized to bring back their bottle by a deposit. That's a precondition we have learned. And we are, by that, collecting 40 billion bottles every year by some 3 billion different consumers. So it works. And to bring some real numbers into that, Lithuania, a country not so far away from here, in 2016 decided to introduce a deposit legislation. Before that, they collected 34% of their bottles and cans. After 2 years, they were up at 92%. New South Wales in Australia, in a couple of years back, introduced a deposit legislation for bottles and cans. Within 1 year, we collected 1 billion bottles there only. And their target was to reduce littering, and the beaches are now clean. Now Scotland, England, European Union, and some parts in Asia are starting to do this. So I'm very encouraged by the development, and we know we can do it. We collect, as I said, 40 billion bottles. With these movements happening now, we are targeting 500 billion by 2030. So now it's really the time to make a step change here. If you look into the sorting of waste, Fleming was talking about that before. We have also the sorting technology, which actually separates the waste into clear fractions. That's a precondition to deliver high quality waste. And we do that in a big scale. We have more than 10,000 of these sorters placed in 80 countries, and they really deliver. They can work both with municipal solid waste streams, first of all in the early stage after collection, and later in the stage where you really do recycling from plastic into pellets. But the core thing here is to make clear fractions. So they really need to be 99.999% clear if it's PET or PE or the like. And you cannot do that manually. You really need these technologies. And this illustration is a little bit complex, but I hope it will still give you an idea. So if you look at the upper area here, you will see that if you collect waste, bottles, it can be other materials too, in a clean environment, you can actually bring it back to a closed loop and do new packaging material out of it, like we also see in the example from Denmark here. Material that's collected from the general household waste, it's a little bit too contaminated that you normally make food packaging out of it, but we can upgrade that plastic to make some really good use. So once it goes down to textile fibers, I would say it's rather at the end of the road. We try to build a system, the circular model, where we do it over and over again. And on the very right corner here, you can see also the tremendous value opportunity in upgrading the plastic. Actually, we could release some $80 billion annually by just building the right systems. So it's possible today, I can guarantee you that. And if I then bring on to that, where we want to go, we have also signed up to the United Nations SDG 17. We also have a food sorting division, so therefore we contribute to zero hunger and life below the ocean. And a little bit more concrete, sorry, I am flipping the, no, it should be here. We have set a target of going, we are committing to collect material, which is today 14% for the future, in the range of 40% by 2030. And we also see that 2% is being closed loop recycled today, and we aim to drive that to 30%. And in all that concludes my presentation on the technology side, what we can really do. And I think, as I said before, the opportunity is now.
Thank you, sir. Could I ask you to take a seat back here still in the audience?
Yeah,
you'll be more comfortable as there's quite a few more to go. And ladies and gentlemen, in keeping with the spirit of upfront credit, please make some noise for Mr. Hämäläinen of Kotkamills.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to briefly tell you how to produce plastic-free cup stock raw material for paper cups. And after that, I will give you some comments about the disposable cup markets globally. Anyway, yeah, let's go forward. So you all have seen all these pictures about plastic waste, read the text, etc. And these photos have put a lot of pressure to the brand owners worldwide, and also pressure to the societies like EU, and they have then kicked the ass of paper industry. We have been rather slow, unfortunately, but we are moving now. Out of the disposable cups, only about 1/3 is fiber-based cups. Fiber-based, but plastic coated at the moment. And 2/3 is full plastic. The situation will change a lot during the next years when the EU regulation come on stream. So this means that the demand of cup stock will increase rapidly. And then the challenge is how to apply this plastic-free coating on top of the board. Water-based dispersions can be easily coated with the new curtain coater unit, but the old-fashioned plate coaters and film coaters, they are not that easy to use in this type of barrier coatings. Some words about dispersions. You can see the process where the dispersions are drying. They slowly move together, back together, and finally they make homogeneous film, and that holds then coffee and other drinks. And the very important thing is that because the chains are very weak, they biodegrade easily, and they also repulp easily. So you can recycle them with the paper waste, and that is a very important thing. We have a system, we have a paper waste collection system, so why not use that instead of reinventing the wheel? Then about the coating technology. Curtain coating unit is actually a rather simple system. The coating color flows on top of the board, which is going underneath there. And if you keep coating colors so that they are a little bit different, you can have up to 3 different layers there, and they do not mix with each other, as you can see from the electron microscope picture over there. 3 different layers, and that's also very important, because now you can form different kind of layers over there. You can use the separate layers to get the multi-barrier properties or enhance some particular properties. So that's very, very useful in practice. And then another important point in curtain coating is that you can have very low coat weights. The coat weight range is extremely wide, from 2 to 30 grams. And 2 grams is important in cup stock production, because the top barrier layer in a paper cup, when you are putting it together in a cup making machine and press it together, making this seal very strong, that top layer is extremely expensive. But if you can create the barrier properties using cheaper chemicals underneath and then use only a couple of grams of this cold dust material, then the production cost will stay reasonable. Here is a slide, a picture of the beginning, first part of our board machine. There is nothing fancy over there. 3 different layers on the board machine, but the fancy part comes from the coating section. We have an on-machine coating system, so this is the end of the baseboard machine. And then first we coat the board using a film coating unit. After that we have 2 curtain coating units, and both of these units, they have 2 slots on each, and then finally we have a plate coating unit to make the top layer very smooth. To have all these 7 different coating layers is very, very special in paper industry. And when we are talking about the cost of paper cup, using different kind of barrier coatings over there. On the left-hand side, you can see the polyethylene-coated cup. Then bioplastic is 1 cent more expensive. And then if you are using the same extrusion equipment, but replace the plastic by a non-plastic material, the price of a cup increases by 1.5 cents. So in the Helsinki downtown, the cup of coffee costs now 3.50. And if you are using non-plastic paper cup, it costs 3.52, and I don't think that will kill anybody. So if we don't make the rules or take the lead in this situation, then somebody else will do. It will be perhaps European Union making tougher rules, or like in England, there was this 25 pence tax, this latte levy suggested, and that means about 30 cents per plastic cup or plastic coated cup. So 30 cents or 2 cents, your choice. And the consumption of fiber-based cup stock material will increase quite a lot after all these regulations come on stream. At the moment, it's about 200,000 tons in Europe, and it will increase to about 650,000 tons if 60% of the full plastic cups are replaced by fiber-based cups. But the industry is ready for that. And then I think the most important slide of my presentation describes the new end uses that we have found after a very active R&D work, and that's hard work, believe me. Gin and tonic is a traditional Finnish papermaker's drink, but if you put the gin first to the paper cup, it goes through, unfortunately. But if you put the tonic first and gin afterwards, the dispersion-coated cup holds it nicely. So next time you go, you order tea and G in a paper cup. And we heard a very good presentation about the beer and other drinks a couple of moments ago. We have also found out that the beer doesn't foam in the dispersion-coated cup. In polyethylene-coated cup, it foams, but in our type of cup, it doesn't. So this means that in the ice hockey games, football matches, beach parties, wherever people drink beer from the plastic bag, you can use recyclable plastic-free products. Thank you very much.
Thank you ever so much. I think it's safe to say that we would like to test this with you today at the pool party. So if you bring some paper cups, I'll bring some gin, and we should have a gin tonic. Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Believe me, I have plenty of cups there. So how big is your wallet?
Well, they're 1.5 cents a piece, aren't they? No, they're 32 cents. I'll get 10. I'll get 10. Thank you very much, sir. I'll ask you back up in a moment. But in the meantime, it's a great pleasure. As you all know, China is the biggest producer of plastics at this moment. So it's a special honor to introduce a lady called Nanjing Zhang from the China Plastics Reuse and Recycling Association. A warm welcome.
It's my honor to be invited to present you the overall, this is a very general overview of the situation in China on this plastic. So this is our target to build the closed loop, the plastic closed loop in China, because now the system is open, but plastic is a chemical product. It really should be closed, managed. Just last year, we have many updates of this plastic. China first banned the imported waste from, then we also know that EU issued its the first circular economy strategy is on plastic, and recently Basel Convention also lifted plastic in the list, and China also issued the zero waste city guidelines, and also Hainan Island is now the first pilot province as an island to ban the single-use plastic. So the association I'm working on is really from those small SMEs working on importing waste plastic, and then circulate them into the pallets, and then it solved all the issues for the Europe and US, but it's only contribute to the production, but it's never really involved into the circular this cycle of in China. So also this sector is a very informal sector, which was never formally fostered by the government. So now all this situation make the country really need to think a plastic, waste plastic should be a formal sector and should be re-managed and rebuilt to set up this closed loop, this country system. And also, I'm from this sector. It's under the petroleum industry, which also, I'm also not against the plastic, but I'm also representing the petroleum sector to really see plastic is the new material polymers for the 21st century. So our life, as people already said, it's promote sustainable development and also improve Chinese people's living standards. So the question is not the plastic is bad, it's just how we manage this. And really in China, we haven't such a system yet. So when we see this picture, Europe is doing the best, but China is really 30% of world production, and we are the #1. We are the whole country. It's more than the whole amount of Europe. So that's a big challenge. But when we look at the data, really, the production of plastic increased from 2010, continuously, annually increased. And the green bar is the amount of recycled plastic we use a lot, about 20 million tons of plastic. So when we look at the plastic recycling rate, it's not very low. It's almost around 20%. So when we said, it's not really that bad in China. And when we look at the production, which the province are more aggregated, it's mainly Guangdong province along near Hong Kong. It's about 25% of all the country production, 1/4. And then also near the Yangtze River and near the coast, Guangdong, Zhejiang, Suzhou, Shandong, and all these provinces, it's almost half of the world, China's production. So we could see that then when we really set up the plastic recycling sectors are also located in this province. So when we look at the recycling, all the materials for packaging, we could see that in China it's similar. The figure is like Europe, 30% is plastic. So that's really a huge amount. And also a big industry in China for packaging as we are the manufacturing. Compared with Indonesia and those Southeast countries, China has we have a good infrastructure for waste treatment, so that we don't see many waste in the city. And every year, the whole country cleaned up like 200 millions of tons of waste. So where this goes, similarly to the plastic production, all these provinces produce the waste that also more distributed in Guangdong, Zhejiang, and Shandong and Jiangsu province. So now, and also plus this super mega city like Beijing, Shanghai. Then when we solve these several key province and mega cities, it really can solve the country's waste problem. So now, as we close the door to imported plastic, so we really need to focus on the domestic market, how we dig out more plastic from the waste. Before, China really has no good sorting system. It's just starting now. Last week, the Chinese president also addressed this issue to have the waste sorting system. So we could see that in the city, waste this composition. Food, it's mainly like 60% of still mainly because Chinese like to cook, so much left over in the waste. So the first issue is how we separate dry and white waste. So plastic is also the second largest waste in this city waste. And also for the city waste, much has been incinerated. Is 60% of plastic is burned. So because why it burned, it has a huge economic value. When we burn, it really has it's not a closed loop. So it's only open-ended. So this is still not the economic model that we have. So when we look at also the waste treatment, this landfill are still the dominating. But China is setting up its own target. So we also want to reach to the like 40% of the recycling rate. So that's why we are working on different plastic material like PET, as said before, PET like TOMRA, PP and agriculture mulch, and PE and PS. Then we could really different categories to build up this different closed loop system. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm standing here next to you to make you uncomfortable, but it seems I was the only one who was slightly uncomfortable. You just didn't break a stride. Thank you very much, and we'll have you back on stage in a moment. Ladies and gentlemen, one more presenter, and then we will start answering your questions, I promise. Keep them coming, they've been good so far. Ladies and gentlemen, next up from VTT is Mr. Wasserher.
Good morning also from me. Not surprisingly, I will also talk about plastics here, but also how it relates to bioeconomy. Plastics has been used for a century now, more than a century now. And first it was a luxury item, then it became a very commonplace material because it's strong, cheap, and easy to produce. You could say that the world has fallen in love with plastics because the production rates have been going up really, really fast. In the 80s, there was roughly 100 million tons made, now 400 million tons in around this time, and in a few years' time, more than 600 million tons. We can only wish that at the same time, our ability to use plastics responsibly would have grown at the same rate. Because now we see then that plastics is ending up in all the wrong places. It's become an environmental hazard and a major problem that we all face. Yet at the same time, in the future, we still need plastics, but we need to rethink how we make it, use it, and recycle it. Roughly half of all plastics waste is coming from packaging. And 2/3 of the packaging waste is then originating from food packaging. And in food packaging, plastics has a really important role because it has been a fantastic thing for both food safety, but also then for reducing food waste. And plastics waste coming from food packaging is actually really hard to handle in a sense because it is, first of all, really easy to discard on the go when you have food packaging made out of plastics. And I'm sure nobody here is doing any discarding. But it's also then that food packaging materials are many times from multi-material solutions, made out of multi-material solutions, and they are hard to recycle. So, what to do? I come from VTT. We are a research institute. Our job is to use science, research, technology to solve these great challenges. And this is one area that what we are really excited about. We believe that we can reduce the life cycle effects of packaging in half by the end of next decade. And now here today in this speech, I focus mostly on the food packaging side and what can be done there. So what's the solution? I have slightly different R's here, so I'm talking about recycling, replacing, importantly, and redesigning. So recycling is, of course, needed, first of all, to make sure then that plastics doesn't go into the wrong places, but also then to make sure then that the need for virgin plastics will go down. Replacing is then really important because we want to get rid of using fossil oil-based raw materials to make plastics. That's something really important, that we can start using renewable raw materials here, and cellulose being one example, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Redesigning is then a combination of both reducing and then rethinking, so basically thinking through then that how to reduce the need for materials, but also then make sure that the first two R's are easy to implement. So examples. First on recycling. Mechanical recycling of plastics is, of course, has been around for a long time, and it's really great when you have clean and homogeneous waste. And when it's about food packaging, you very rarely have neither clean nor homogeneous waste there. Chemical recycling is then something which we think is really exciting. We've been working with a technology called pyrolysis and utilizing then that to break down the plastics into its basic constituents, or basic building blocks. With pyrolysis, you can essentially break the heterogeneous waste into a pyrolysis oil, which can be then fed straight into the processes of petrochemical plants, where they can then refine it further, polymerize, and then turn it into plastics products. And this enables then essentially then to process very heterogeneous waste. Second example is then on this replacing. And that's where we want to be creating equally good materials as fossil-based plastics, but out of renewable raw materials. And we are focusing on cellulose, cellulose being the most abundant plant constituent on Earth. So there's plenty of that. And with chemical modifications, you can turn then cellulose into thermoplastic cellulose, which is then equally produced. You can use it then in equal way as fossil-based plastic. But now here's when it gets really exciting and interesting. When you create multi-layer solutions, so you have these films made out of thermoplastic cellulose, and then you sandwich in between their nanocellulose, you can create really efficient packaging material that has excellent barrier characteristics, so blocking water, moisture, and also oxygen. And that's then exactly what you want for food packaging, especially in demanding solutions like packaging chocolate. Mark was excited about tonic and gin. I'm a chocolate lover, so kind of making sure that you can create 100% recyclable and 100% bio-based packaging there is something we believe is a really important thing. So the technology, we believe that it can be developed to use still plastics in a responsible way. But the thing that has to change also is then how we behave and how we behave in utilizing plastics. And that's the hard part. It's a very systemic change. It requires collaboration across the whole value network involved. And that's why we need innovation, we need new ways of thinking. And we at VTT, we are extremely committed to do our part here. And we are, of course, inviting then all the like-minded people then to join us in this really important quest. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. If I could ask you to take a seat here in the panel. I would like to ask our panelists to come up, Mr. Besenbacher, Mr. Hämäläinen, Ms. Nanjing, and Mr. Rundstrand. Yeah, keep them coming, keep them coming. Thank you for leaving the awkward middle seat. We'll start with a quick question from the audience, and actually, this is by far my favorite. So if Alex Hahn is in the crowd, if you could collect, I'd like to buy you a beer later. Thank you for the 18 questions that you sent. I picked one which was really, really good. To all of you now, should we add reward into the 4 Rs as a 5th R? After all, the true reason behind a 93% return related for beverage bottles is because of the reward.
Yeah, I think it's a very good proposal. You can both think of a reward for the consumer to contribute to a better environment and a circular system. You can also think of a reward for the industry, where you think about the more you produce of plastic waste, and the reward is the higher the collection and circularity rate you get, the lesser will be your EPR fee. So I think reward is an excellent proposal here.
I'd like to ask you, ma'am, is that something that China has considered? Is this something that could work for you?
Yeah, China hasn't implemented EPR, and the deposit system, there's a quite a big argument. It's because it's a very a huge risk, I think, from beverage side when you really ask consumer to pay for the deposit. But I think from the blockchain data, we've already discussing it's, I think, how to collect those for packaging funding to be as a fund, and then use these to reward, as for the consumers.
So is the proposal then to basically have understand where the plastic is from, the packaging is from, and price it into the manufacturer's cost?
Yes, I think for the packaging, really the reward, the income should not really goes to the manufacturer. It really should go to the public fund. Then how to manage to reward consumers?
Okay, interesting proposal there, gentlemen. Would you like to care to comment? Anyone else?
Well, I think it's a great idea, and again, I mean, there's no simple solution here. We have to get the consumers on board. We also get businesses on board. I think there should reward to consumers when they actually doing the right thing and helping and recollecting. We have the system, as you showed us today, so each of us have to do things in that direction here. I think what you showed us with rewarding with new technology, that's very much needed also. We have to, of course, new technology often costs too many money in the beginning, but on the other hand, when we scale it up and so forth, then it will be things which we all have to adopt. So I think rewards, I mean, we would all like to be rewarded for what we're doing, and I think rewarding businesses, institutions, and consumers is a great thing here, because we all partnership again. None of us can do this alone. We have to engage with all of us.
Most certainly. I have one about legislation. So it feels, and there's a lot of legislative questions here from the audience. There seems to be a lot of confusion about what sort of the recycling laws in different countries are. I mean, it feels to me like business has understood. I mean, my own company, Vipak, we've declared today that we will be carbon neutral within 5 years. Mercedes-Benz was some weeks ago declaring the same. Even in Denmark, there is meat producers now who've pledged to become carbon neutral, which never anyone thought that Danish bacon would sort of attempt to do that. I think business has understood. So what's now required in terms of clarity and legislation in order to get this really to fly?
Well, from my point of view, again, as I mentioned in my speech later on, I mean, there will soon come out a report where 15 scientists from around the world have looked in sort of the climate panel reports from UN, because by the end of the day, it's a question about priority. Where do we spend our money, and where do we get most value for our money? And I had a chance to talk to one of the scientists, a Danish professor from Copenhagen University, and I mean, it doesn't look too good right now. We actually not on all parameters going the right direction. I think that what you showed today, again, if we go into more sustainable energy production, the big issues there is storage. How do we store energy? In Denmark, we have a lot of wind farms. There are certain days where we produce more energy than what we consume ourselves. But having an efficient storage system is mandatory if you do these things here. I think also the report we saw recently, sort of the biodiversity in our society, it's a slightly scary thing than what was it, 2,000 species which might disappear in the next 20, 15 years ago. I mean, that's very, very scary, and we all have to take that very serious. And therefore, I think also from the government point of view, I mean, also the way they spend their money on this climate issue. I mean, we're seeing many companies, you mentioned some of them jumping on the wagon, and now we will also do things. But doing it in a wise way and science-based, I think, to me, is incredibly important.
I will hand over to you, sir, in just a second. I just want to resharpen the question a little bit, refocus it. What is needed in terms of legislation, and on what level?
So I'm very inspired by what the European Union is doing right now. They are putting out two distinct targets. One is for what is to be collected. They say by 2029, 90% of all the plastic bottles being sold into the market needs to be collected. So that's a clear target. The second they say is that by 2029, 35% of every new plastic object that's being produced needs to contain recycled content. Then you can argue about 35 or 45, but that is a very clear regulation.
But let me push back a little bit on that for all of you. So it seems to me that one of the problems is that despite these umbrella legislations from the European Union, what is considered recyclable is different for every EU country, and even how you recycle, for instance, in Denmark is different in each region. You have 4 collection boxes in one and then 2 in another. Surely a target 2030 is not enough to get this harmonized across Europe just yet. Sir.
So the whole thing that we're discussing here is extremely systemic. And that means, of course, kind of like then that the single things here and there, of course, kind of like help, but they don't look at the big picture. And that's why this is also so challenging. Kind of like related to the things that I was, for example, showing here, up until 2015, still waste was waste, and the only use for that was turning it into energy. So with the 2015 EU position, then now you can have waste as raw material. So how to make that legislation then to work, but also kind of like then that how it takes into account the new technologies much faster. Like this chemical recycling is still kind of like more in the waste category and not being like pyrolysis oil is not being recognized, as far as I know, as a raw material. So it's basically you're transporting waste there. But it's also sort of then coming back to this point around reward, that there needs to be sort of a just minimum viable regulation that the governments are putting in place so that it enables that the recycling can be profitable business for the companies involved. So in a sense then that there is enough regulation to make sure then that it's responsible and kind of fulfills the environmental targets, but then enough room for innovation and then making it a business, so that will then pull companies in and kind of like the ball will start really rolling.
So would it unfair of me to sum it up as message to the legislators, legislate faster?
And just the right amount, not too much.
Yes, certainly.
One thing more on that. You know, Ellen MacArthur Foundation said there has been so many sign-ups now. So if we want to deliver on these commitments, we need to deliver the system to deliver on the commitments. Because if all of these companies saying we will transform our industry to circular or to sustainable packaging, well, they need to get the sourcing from somewhere. So here the industry and legislators really need to work hand in hand.
Sir, I know that a good CEO has an opinion on everything, but gives space to his people to make up their own minds first. But I'd like to expressly ask you for your opinion or a comment.
Personally, I'm more sort of involved of this kind of single-use plastic items, and the recyclability and recycling of plastic is really not my specialty. So I'm listening efficiently, and I like what I hear. Keep going.
Well, yes, give him who's clapping? Everyone clap, come on. If one person claps, don't let him down. Perfect answer. I have a sort of a more wide question to all of you. So, you know, if any quick wins, so if you'd have to focus on one thing quickly, what would that be? And we'll continue from this corner and we'll go around the half circle. Sir, if you may.
I think that after seeing that this kind of boost that this European Union single-use plastic has given to the industry, I think that we need more regulation, which is, I know it's a stupid thing to say because I just said that the industry should take the lead, but if we are not able to do that, then it's good if somebody puts us to the right track. We started this thing already 5, 6, 7 years ago, and the plastic hula started 2 years ago. We hope that other guys will follow us, because at the moment we are the only supplier of this kind of products, and that's not good for the market. We need more suppliers. We need more companies to come there and start replacing single-use plastics by other things.
Very good.
I believe public procurement is going to have a huge change on the whole market here, because if all public sectors were thinking more circular when they do procurement, that would really have a big drive on the industry. And I think if you take just one single example, public procurement would actually help tremendously.
Yeah, and we have over half the economy is public sector in the Nordics, so we have a huge opportunity here as well. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think in China, in the past decade, we have already built up the capacity for recycling industry equipment and technologies. So I think for technically aspect, it's not a really problem. So now it's really, people are really looking at from the branding companies who has made a global commitment. When they come to China, all the market legislations are different. So, and also upstream, now these petroleum companies are also ready to, from design material side, to improve. So I think all the technologies parts are ready. So we are just seeing how to set up this platform and also engage all the partners in this supply chain or this closed loop. Then it's really need to work together, not only one company or one sector. It's not enough to solve this plastic issue. Yeah.
If the Earth was seen as a human, we are probably normal temperature 36.9 or 37 degrees. Probably today the Earth would be 38 to 38.5 degrees. We are having fever, climate change, but all aspects. So I would just stress the sense of urgency, take inspiration from all what's happening, collaborate more, as you said, Fleming, but really do something. That is my point. There are solutions, but we really need to move in the industry with legislators and all the global thinkers.
Well, building on what Stefan said on the quick win side, then that the find these ways how we get the new technologies to market faster, and there are ideas or technologies or solutions already that with the life cycle effects have really beneficial effect. But when you start small, then the recycling requirements and these types of things are tough hurdles to get to when you start from very low volume. So come up with ways how we can kind of like incentivize the new technologies to come to market quicker.
I have one more for you guys. What's your, I mean, you think about plastics and recycling all the time. So what is your favorite misconception that the wider public holds or has held in the past? We'll go back this way, if you please.
Well, if I put again my food packaging hat on, so I've understood that people think that kind of like that you can only use recycled plastic in food packaging if it's coming from food packaging originally at the moment. But that's not true when you go to chemical recycling and some of the new technologies, so that when you really break it down to molecules, it's pure and clean. So in that sense, then that I think that we can be more aggressive than on the food packaging side.
I just had one really good other question, so I'm just going to ask who wants to answer the misconception one. I don't require everyone to answer it. If someone has a good one, what is a misconception?
I think China is big.
Yeah, China, I think Chinese always want to have a silver bullet to solve all this plastic. I think they have a misunderstanding that plastic is bad, especially single-use plastic. So now they're promoting a biodegradable plastic. But in fact, biodegradable, it's really not the real solution. It also needs to be decomposable, compostable, and should not mix with normal plastic. So we really need to let people realize consumers have the responsibility. We should first to sort the waste first. Yeah.
I think building on that, it was mentioned this morning, standardization. I mean, the more types we have, the more complex the systems get. I do not want to argue. I think we should be open for new good innovations. That's the way to go forward. But we also need to try to have some standardization. Remember, all new streams we generate, they need their special economic loops. And in a way, that also hinders the development. So being smart here, focus, and having a clear agenda, at the same time being open for innovation. So supporting what you say there.
Good. And I guess, I mean, we can all be scared by seeing these movies about plastic in the ocean. And what's mentioned here, I mean, as many tons of plastic as fish in the ocean, which is, of course, a catastrophe and so forth here. We just have to realize we cannot, I mean, we still need plastic in our society. We should just be much better in doing it in an intelligent way. We should be much better in recycling. We should be much redesigning, phasing out these type of plastics which maybe cannot be recycled and so forth. Develop new technology, chemical recycling, mechanical recycling, and so forth. So, I mean, plastic is not as such dangerous. I mean, we just have to use it in a more intelligent way.
I have one more. We have time for one more, and luckily the audience has come to our aid with a very good question. So, waste is increasingly becoming valuable now. How do you see the solution around the ownership of consumer waste to avoid maldistribution of wealth again? Go ahead.
Yeah, there was a session this morning of extended producer responsibility, and I think it's absolutely a must to have systems like that where the producers feel responsible for it. But you can actually you can transform the responsibility in the value chain, because we know ultimately the consumers, if we don't get the consumers into solving the problem, we will not solve the problem. So a collaboration with the industry and the consumers with some kind of EPR is the right combination.
So distributing that wealth between the consumer and the producer.
Yeah, you can think of, say, a deposit system. I should not sit here and promote it as the only solution, but it really works. The consumer pay a fee for when they buy an object. They don't buy the bottle, they borrow the bottle. They buy the Carlsberg inside. That's what they want to have. And when they return that bottle, which they have borrowed, they get their remuneration back. And I think that's exactly a model we can expand to further materials.
I think to give some courage to you, ma'am. So I lived in Germany at the time when the German consumer was asked 2000, 2001 to pay, and the outcry was massive. But no one talks about it now. So it's okay now.
Yeah, I think in China we don't have such a deposit system. So to build from zero, it's really a huge investment in infrastructure, which is not feasible now. Also, China has a big collector group community. So the problem is now, but solid waste, it's also a new investment. I think there are already giant companies like Veolia already invested in the Chinese recycling plastic recycling companies. So I think those companies who have good technologies and can really have the value-added products much higher, because for a closed loop, you must at the end bring values of those products, recycled products. So we have bottle to bottle. We have these chemical cycling of textile for the supplier to the market in Japan. Those companies are really make great profits. So I'm very convinced that those companies who have good technologies will finally survive and will grow up. Yes.
I'll hand over in a second. I've just got one sort of a persistent someone called Big D has asked several times now, who are the bad guys? We shouldn't point fingers, but it's very entertaining. You're looking at us, so if you feel like pointing fingers, please do it, but then also have a conversation with us after. Thank you. Did you still have a comment on the previous question? Yes. So.
I think that it just occurred to my mind that how could we get a deposit for the used paper cup? Because the paper cup, non-plastic coated paper cup, is extremely good raw material for the waste paper markets. It's mostly chemical pulp and some high-quality CTMP in there, and it's very, very strong, and it has been only dried once, so it has about 7 lives still left, and it would be waste to compost that or let it biodegrade. We need to recycle it.
You've managed to do so much promotion for your cups today that I think you should provide Alex with a free cup for his gin and tonic later on. I have one really good one as a finisher. Somehow the technical crew over there has given us more time, so they reset the timer at some stage. Thank you for that. Luckily, there's over 100 audience questions, and this one is a really good finisher for all of you in the panel. How does the panel involve young people and their energy in finding new solutions?
Well, if I should start out, besides being chairman of Carlsberg, I'm actually chairing an organization called Unleash, where every year we bring 1,000 talents from around the world together in one place. It started out in Denmark in 2017.
How can you apply? Because I think there's some young people here. So
Unleash.org. actually coming together, rethinking new solutions to the 17th Sustainable Development Goal. We will go to Shenzhen in China from November the 6th to the 13th. And I must say this energy and creativity among these young people is really amazing. So that's one thing which at least I'm trying, engage with the youth. They have many great ideas.
Great. Yes?
We want to hire them. We want absolutely get the young people as researchers at VTT. We need the new brains and young brains then to come up with the new solutions.
Anyone else, or you prefer hiring old people?
I think we all have a responsibility for the generation to come and engaging them both in the daily activity and hiring them in, and also make the whole thing fun. We have made gamification of the whole recycling so that people enjoy it, or we can educate, become an educational platform. These are also concepts we're working on. So really engage and understand what the millennials want, because they are the future.
Yeah, I think in China now the lifestyle has changed a lot. Now the young people always order foods completely different. So we really need to get them involved to know really how to make their lifestyle sustainable. Then you, through your own behavior, you can just do some little things, then you can make a change, not really to invite a huge, big invention, but instead of changing the lifestyle to be more sustainable. So that's why we're also promoting SDGs, especially on sustainable consumption. Yeah.
Final word?
I'm quiet this time, so.
You're embarrassed now because I called you out on selling the cups. I'll still buy some. Ladies and gentlemen, what a fantastic session. Please give it up to our panelists. Thank you. Have a great lunch break, and we'll see you here later.